Anna, you got drive-up margarita bars.
Well, I'm just saying that these police seem to not hold very much power and not very useful.
Well, yeah, there's that. So, once the car was out of the ditch and back on the road, they escorted him to the highway, and that's where they went their separate ways. So you're asking, how does this connect? I'll tell you. Unless you've already figured it out.
I don't know what the fuck's going on. This guy's out in the middle of the night
I know.
for the View. These cops aren't doing anything for anybody.
Well, here's how it went. 2 months later, Dana Jaffe, the owner of the property, would be calling the police once again. It was on November 28th. She'd found something she thought the police might be interested in. She led the officer to a place where loggers had partially cleared trees on her land. There on the ground was a piece of a silk cloth that kind of looked like a hood. And there were also straps from packing tape and torn leggings or tights, whatever you want to call them. There were a knot with human hair stuck in it as well.
Good job, guys. Good job.
Jaffe had heard about the abduction of Paul and Klaas and had a horrible feeling that the items were connected to the abduction, and that's why she called the police. So, yeah, the babysitter, probably, she's thinking, came in contact with a killer. Now, investigators had a name because, like I said, they ran his ID through the system that night. So now they had that guy's name because they're starting to put things together. He was in this area. Now we're finding this stuff on her private property, so on and so forth. So, like I said, they ran his name through their system, and he sure had it. His name was Richard Allen Davis.
That sounds like an asshole.
The cloth found on Dana's property also looked to match the one found in Polly's bedroom, and now they needed to find Polly, who they feared had already been murdered. They searched the Jaffe property and the surrounding area. There was a heavy rainstorm, which definitely can make it much more difficult to find any kind of evidence, or it could have even been washed away.
Right, I'm going to say it's 2 months out now.
Right. But that search continued. However, it was deemed unsuccessful. They decided to turn their attention to Richard himself. The police were able to verify his mother did live in Petaluma, and since he also resembled the sketches of the abductor, they tracked him to an Indian ranchera near, I want to say, Yucca, California, where his sister lived. And when they got there, they discovered he wasn't there, so they set up roadblocks around the area, hoping that if he did show up there, they'd be able to catch him before he bolted. Sure enough, he pulled up in a van. It's always a van.
Oh, was it a windowless white van?
Didn't say, but it's always
It probably was, I bet. I would put money on that.
So one of the officers asked him for his ID, and it was, sure enough, Richard Allen Davis. So the police immediately swarmed his car, or van, and arrested him for a probation violation that he had had previous from a drunk driving arrest. So he got the drunk driving arrest after they pulled him out of the ditch. And if he had had it prior to that,
they would have known about
they would have gotten him. So, where was I?
Why can't these fuckers fuck up quicker?
I know. So they couldn't actually arrest him yet on Polly's abduction because they didn't have that much evidence against him. But then in November of 30th of that very year, the authorities began interrogating Davis for the abduction of Polly, which he vehemently denied. Jillian and Kate were then brought in for a lineup of possible suspects, and sure enough, they picked him out immediately without any kind of hesitation. And the partial palm print found at the Klaas home was a perfect match against Richard's.
That motherfucker. I bet that lady feels like an asshole now.
Well, she should.
Right.
And so should the neighbors for not saying anything.
Fuckers.
So, on December 4th, Davis told the investigators he, quote-unquote, screwed up big time. And he wanted to show them where Polly's body was. He took them to near Cloverdale, California, off of Highway 101, to her little body, which was pretty badly decomposed due to the amount of time she'd been missing. Her skirt was pulled up a bit, but her underwear and bra were still on. Next to her was a rope and a knotted cloth, thought to be how she died of strangulation. Semen was also found on her body. However, they couldn't confirm a sexual assault had taken place. And
that's enough, finding semen on her body.
However, evidence showed a story David refused to admit. Davis said that the night he planned on visiting his mother, Evelyn, he couldn't find her address because he was drunk. He continued drinking, and he admitted to using street drugs. He continued walking, carrying his duffel bag, and cutting strips of cloth with scissors before finding a random home and climbing through the open window. The next thing he said he remembered was that he had a girl in the car next to him, and she was complaining about her ties being too tight. He went on to say that he got his car stuck, so he got out of the car, brought her up the embankment, and told her to be quiet while he tried to get the car out of the ditch. And that's where he said Polly was the entire time he was talking to police. I'm not buying it.
No, because they escorted him out of there. How would he get her in the car?
He went on to say that when they escorted him to the highway, he waited 15 minutes before turning back and picking her up. I can't imagine that's true at all, because why wouldn't she be making noise? The police are right there.
Oh, I'd be screaming.
Right.
Or run my ass to the house that's up the private driveway.
Yep. So he then went on to say that he took her to a gas station because she needed to use the restroom, and quickly realized that he couldn't let her go because he didn't want to give himself away and end up back in jail. So allegedly, listen to this part, this is also what pissed me off. He refused to refer to Polly as anything other than a broad. And he refused to say that he assaulted her.
Well, his new name is Fuckface.
Yeah. So what I think was he didn't want to admit that he had assaulted her because he knew his ass was going to jail. And he knows that in prison, inmates have their own kind of justice for people that hurt children. So,
oh yeah, if he wasn't...
honestly, in my opinion, it's exactly what he deserves.
No, you just throw them in Gen Pop and let nature take its course.
Yep. Many people believe that his story wasn't the entire truth, and that when the police assisted him with his car, she'd already been murdered, which that's what we thought. Mm-hmm. Regardless, though, he was in custody, and they had the confession they needed. So in 1996, Richard Allen Davis was brought to trial, where he again said he didn't sexually assault Polly because of something that she had said about her dad. And he said that Polly told him, "Just don't do me like my dad," insinuating that her father had assaulted her previously.
Oh, he's such a fucking
Can you imagine? That's like pouring salt into the wound.
I would have gotten up. They would have had many bailiffs.
So, this obviously and rightfully so made Mark angry enough to lunge at him, but was quickly restrained and ended up leaving the courtroom to avoid causing further commotion. It's obvious he was attempting to place blame on Mark and take some of the heat off of him. But no one believed that he was telling the truth of his suggesting that he had hurt his daughter.
And listen, if I'm the judge, I would have taken my time calling the bailiffs on him.
I would have let him get his swings in.
Yep. Like, oh, what happened?
But they normally jump right on somebody quick.
I know. That's the unfortunate thing.
I asked Frank that. Why do you have to, like, jump on them? Let them get their licks in. But Frank's like, you can't do that.
Well, he was a complete fuckface, and he did awful, awful things. Yep. One sucker punch to the face is not nearly enough.
No, it's not. It's a small price to pay. So he was doing anything and everything to taunt this family with his story of Mark's abuse of his own daughter. He even went so far as to flipping off with double fingers the media in the courtroom. Like, double
deuces.
Yep.
What a fucker.
Yep. So on June 18th, 1996, after 10 weeks of deliberation, and here's my thing. What the hell is the matter with you people that it took 10 weeks?
No, it would have been 2 seconds, like this fucker's going to the chair.
I guess we're never going to be on a court.
Doubt it.
So, Judge Thomas C. Hastings proceeded to formally sentence Davis to death, saying, Mr. Davis, this is always a traumatic and emotional decision for a judge. However, you've made it very easy today by your conduct.
Boom! Mic drop.
Yep. So Richard Allen Davis was convicted of kidnapping, murder, and sentenced to death on August 5th, 1996.
I would have been exactly 1 year and 1 day old.
So, we often look into past killers that we've featured on our podcast to maybe gain some insight of what may have occurred earlier in their life that might be a factor in their deviant behavior. But don't get me wrong. Under no circumstances are Kelly and I saying that your past is responsible for your present or your future. I'm just saying sometimes it does factor in, but certainly isn't an excuse. So Davis was born to alcoholic parents who allegedly punished him with tactics most would consider child abuse. For instance, his mother punished him for smoking by burning his hand. By age 11, he was already abusing and harming animals. Red flag. Yeah. And according to the mother of one of Davis's childhood friends, he allegedly doused a...
This is going to make me cry.
Yep. He doused a cat with gasoline and set it on fire. He also carried a knife and cut stray dogs. That is one fucked up kid. He's
worse than Pocket Robin guy that I was telling you about. That small town murder did, and then I wanted to follow up on it. It's like, that remember he was cooking with ketchup on a boilerplate in his room, and his parents let him go out at night doing this.
This kid is worse.
No, he's just hurting things to hurt them. He's not eating them.
So he was a fucked up kid before he was a fucked up adult. So he was well on his way to being the shitty person he is today.
We should douse him in
kerosene. That should happen. He should get, you know what, an eye for an eye.
Mm-hmm.
So in the years to follow...
I don't care if I go blind.
In the years to follow, he committed an assortment of crimes, including stealing, forgery, theft of a motorcycle, public intoxication, travel violations, burglary, and that's just to name a few. The judge at the time offered him the opportunity to enlist in the Army, or he would be sent to juvenile detention, so he opted to enlist. Wow. The defender of our country.
Yeah.
But that didn't work out well. His military career lasted a short 13 months due to his many infractions, including going AWOL, and fighting, and the use of morphine. So I'm assuming it was a dishonorable discharge.
I should hope so.
At 21, he was charged with burglary, but ended up serving only a year. 7 weeks after he got out, he kidnapped a woman in a parking lot by knife point, took her to an abandoned area where he tried to get her to perform certain acts. But his plan didn't work out as he had expected. The woman grabbed the knife out of his hand and ran for her life.
I would have stabbed the motherfucker and then ran.
Yeah, you want me to perform? You perform, motherfucker! I'm wound up today.
Sorry, and I'm not helping that.
So anyway, thankfully a police officer driving by at the time stopped to help her and ultimately arrested Davis on the spot. He then tried to take his own life during this jail sentence and was sent to a psychiatric hospital.